Welcome to our deep dive into some tricky English words and phrases.
Yeah,
We've got a really interesting mix today,
right.
all pulled from sources you provided. We'll be exploring everything from a phrasal verb to modern slang,
Yeah,
and hopefully uncovering some fun facts along the way.
absolutely. And we've got a
Yeah.
phrasal verb, an idiom, a regular vocabulary word,
Okay,
and even a bit of slang to unpack.
cool.
It's amazing how much culture and history can be packed into even the simplest words and phrases.
Okay, let's dive right in.
Yeah,
The first word on our list is mull over.
okay.
And it instantly makes me think of those moments when you're faced with a tough decision
hmm
and you just need time to process it all,
Uh,
like when you're staring at a menu with too many delicious options and you
oh,
just can't decide.
you've got it.
Yeah.
Mull over really captures that feeling of careful consideration.
Yeah.
It's about taking the time to weigh your
That's
options,
okay.
think through the pros and cons, and let things settle in your mind before taking action.
I can definitely relate to that. I'm the kind of person who needs to sleep on it
Yeah,
before making big decisions. But I've also noticed that sometimes mulling over can turn into procrastination.
sure.
Is there a way to tell the difference between productive deliberation and just delaying the inevitable?
That's a great question. I think the key difference lies in whether you're actively engaging with the decision-making process
Right.
or simply avoiding it.
Yeah.
Productive mulling over involves gathering information,
Hmm.
exploring different perspectives,
Yeah.
and maybe even talking things through with someone you trust.
Right.
It's about moving towards a decision, even if it's a gradual process.
Yeah.
Procrastination, on the other hand,
Okay.
tends to be fueled by fear or anxiety.
Hmm.
It's about putting things off because you're afraid of making the wrong choice.
So if you find yourself stuck in a loop of endlessly mulling over something without making any progress, it might be time to ask yourself if you're truly deliberating or just procrastinating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best way to move forward is to set a deadline for yourself
Okay.
and commit to making a decision by that date.
That makes sense.
It can help to create a sense of urgency and prevent you from getting bogged down in endless deliberation.
That's a great tip. Now let's shift gears and talk about an idiom that always paints a vivid picture in my mind.
Okay.
Beyond the pale. It sounds almost ominous, like something out of a Gothic novel.
It does have a rather dramatic ring to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the historical origins of the phrase
Right.
definitely contribute to that sense of drama.
Yeah.
You see, beyond the pale originally referred to the area outside of the pale,
Uh-huh.
which was the English-controlled territory in Ireland back in the 17th century.
I remember reading about the Pale in history class.
Oh, yeah?
It was considered the civilized safe zone,
hmm
while anything beyond its borders was seen as wild and lawless.
Precisely so. Being beyond the pale meant being outside of English law and order,
Okay.
and by extension, outside of acceptable behavior.
Interesting.
And that meaning has carried through to the present day, even though the historical context has faded.
So even though most people probably don't think about the Pale when they use the phrase, that historical baggage is still lurking beneath the surface, adding to its intensity.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating
Yeah.
is that the concept of acceptable behavior itself is constantly evolving.
Right.
What might have been considered beyond the pale a century ago
Mm-hmm.
might be perfectly normal today, and vice versa.
It's true.
It's a reminder that language is fluid and reflects the changing values of society.
It makes you wonder what phrases we use today might seem completely outdated or even offensive to people 100 years from now.
That's a thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
It highlights how language is constantly adapting
Yeah.
to reflect our changing understanding of the world.
Okay.
Speaking of adapting, let's move on to a word that describes something small and often overlooked:
Okay.
knickknacks. I'm curious, do you have any knickknacks in your home?
Oh, I'm definitely a knickknack enthusiast.
Okay,
My shelves are full of little trinkets and treasures that I've collected over the years.
cool.
I have a particularly quirky ceramic frog that I picked up at a flea market.
Oh, fun.
It always makes me smile.
It's funny how those little objects can hold so much sentimental value.
Yeah.
Knickknack itself is such a playful word, perfectly capturing their lighthearted and often whimsical nature.
Right.
But it's not the only word we use for these sorts of objects.
Sure.
Trinket, bauble, and curio all come to mind.
Mm.
Do you think there are subtle differences in how we use those words?
That's interesting. I think trinket often implies something small and inexpensive,
Yeah.
while curio might suggest something a bit more unique or valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And bauble seems to emphasize the decorative aspect, maybe something shiny or sparkly.
You're absolutely right. Those subtle shades of meaning enrich our vocabulary and allow us to express ourselves with more precision.
Mm.
It's a reminder that even seemingly simple words
Right.
can have layers of complexity.
So the next time I'm admiring my ceramic frog collection, I'll be sure to choose my words carefully.
Now, from charming trinkets to a modern-day phenomenon that can be quite, shall we say, unsettling.
Oh boy.
Let's talk about ghosting.
Oh.
Have you ever experienced this or know someone who has?
Um,
Welcome back. I don't know about you,
yeah.
but these words have really gotten me thinking about how much we take language for granted.
Right.
It's more than just a tool for communication.
Uh,
It's a reflection of culture, history, and even our own personal experiences.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating.
Yeah.
We're not just learning definitions. We're
Right.
exploring the nuances and layers of meaning that give these words their power.
Exactly. Take mull over, for instance.
Okay.
It highlights the importance of careful deliberation. But it also reminds us that sometimes we need to set boundaries between thoughtful consideration and unproductive procrastination.
Right. And then there's beyond the pale.
Yeah.
It's a phrase that's steeped in history, revealing how concepts of acceptable behavior have shifted over time and continue to evolve even today.
It's a stark reminder that language isn't static.
Yeah.
It's constantly adapting to reflect the changing values and norms of society.
And even something as seemingly simple as knick-knack can spark a discussion about the subtle differences between synonyms and how we choose the most precise word to convey our meaning.
It's those subtle distinctions that allow us to express ourselves with nuance and creativity.
Right.
And then there's ghosting,
Oh, yeah.
a word that's become all too familiar in our digital age.
Right.
It speaks to the challenges of navigating relationships in a world where communication is often fleeting and impersonal.
It's almost like we need a whole new vocabulary to describe the complexities of modern relationships.
Perhaps we do. But even with these new challenges, I think there's something timeless about the human need for connection and the importance of treating each other with respect and consideration.
Well said. So for our listeners who are on their own English language learning journey, what advice would you give them for mastering these sometimes tricky words and phrases?
One of the most effective strategies is to focus on context.
Okay.
Instead of just memorizing definitions,
Yeah.
try to encounter these words and phrases in real-world situations.
Okay.
Read books, watch movies, listen to podcasts,
Right.
and pay attention to how native speakers use them in conversation.
So it's about immersing yourself in the language and observing how these words function in their natural habitat.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Right.
Language learning is a process of trial and error.
Sure.
The more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
It's like learning any new skill. It takes time, patience, and a willingness to embrace the inevitable stumbles along the way.
Absolutely. And remember, even native speakers are constantly learning and expanding their vocabulary.
Right.
Language is a lifelong journey of discovery.
Speaking of discovery, I have a challenge for our listeners. I challenge you to become word detectives.
Okay.
Pay attention to the language you encounter in your daily life
Right.
and see if you can spot these words and phrases mull over, beyond the pale, knickknacks, ghosting in the wild.
That's a fantastic idea. It's like a scavenger hunt for vocabulary.
Yeah.
And once you've spotted them,
Right.
try using them in your own conversations.
Okay.
The more you use them, the
Yeah.
more comfortable you'll become.
And who knows, you might even spark some interesting discussions along the way.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Okay.
The cultural insights that these words and phrases can provide.
Yes, this is such an important aspect of language learning that often gets overlooked.
Mhm.
It's not just about the words themselves,
Right.
but about what they reveal, about the values, beliefs, and historical experiences of the people who use them.
For instance, Beyond the Pale gives us a glimpse into the power dynamics and social hierarchies of 17th century Ireland.
And ghosting reflects the unique challenges and opportunities of communication in the digital age.
It's a reminder that language is a living, breathing entity that's constantly evolving to reflect the world around us.
So, dear listener, we encourage you to approach language learning with a sense of curiosity and wonder.
Yeah.
Don't just memorize words and grammar rules, explore their origins, their cultural significance, and the stories they tell.
Absolutely.
You'll find that language is so much more than just a means of communication. It's a window into the human experience.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive
Yeah.
into these fascinating English words and phrases.
It's been fun.
It's amazing how much we've uncovered just by exploring these 4 examples.
I know, it really shows you how much depth there is to language. It's
Yeah.
like each word is a tiny little portal
Right.
into a whole world of history,
Yeah.
culture, and human experience. I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And